Wow. Good afternoon or morning still. It feels like we have had such a packed discussion and a packed morning. So I think we are already in the afternoon, right, of this wonderful day and this kickoff of this very important forum, the first global forum on buildings and construction, hosted generously by the French government. My name is Jorge Laguna Celis. I am the head of the Secretariat of the One Planet Network we are a unit powered by the United Nations Environment Program that builds alliances and partnerships. And today, I really want to greet and welcome each and every one of you that is attending our session today, which will be speaking about, as a matter of fact, the power of the public purse, the power of public procurement. And let me start just with an icebreaker question, and we don't have yet a Mentimeter for you, but how many of you have been involved, and it's a loaded question, but how many of you have been involved in a public tender, whether it is submitting a proposal, reviewing a proposal, or allocating a proposal? You've come to the right place. And what's interesting about the work and the discussions that we're going to have today, it is that they situate at a point in time and on the basis of so many things that we have learned this morning. For those of you that were in the opening of this global forum, you probably heard, and I hope that each and every one of you wrote down the key message, that it is that, as a matter of fact, by 2060, we will be using 60% of extraction of natural resources to build to meet the needs and the demands of generations to come, particularly from a point of view of buildings. You have also heard, and therefore these are completely alarming trends. The job that we all have and that brings us all together is how we reduce that 60% because we don't have enough planets to a much, much manageable levels. You have also heard, and this is also something critically important to our work, it is that we don't start from scratch. We have, as a matter of fact, in COP28 agreed to a landmark commitment, and this is the Buildings Breakthrough. This Buildings Breakthrough, what it says and what it means and what it actually represents for us, it is a great opportunity to steer the international community towards reducing that level of extraction of resources and start thinking of materials as a resource, not only at the moment of conception, at the moment of use, but at the moment of recovery. And these Buildings Breakthrough, I have learned, and I hope that you also keep this in mind in our discussion today, have 3 principles that are key for us. The first principle, I mean, there are 10 principles, but there are 3 that matter for me specifically. One of it is to retrofit, particularly in this context, in the European context, thinking about how can we better retrofit what has already been built to reduce the intensity of resources. The second is how do we think towards the future and design for circularity. And finally, when we can no longer retrofit, when it's infrastructure that has already been developed, how do we recover these materials and we adopt a material circularity approach. So my conclusion is very simple. To reach carbon and circularity targets in the built environment, we must build less but better. Our session today, it's about public procurement. Why? Because it holds huge untapped potential for decarbonizing the building and the construction sector. We are aware that national and local governments can take the lead in decarbonizing our built environment while driving market transformation. As regulators, as urban planners, as territorial planners, as investors, or even as entrepreneurs or architects, you know that public procurement really contains the key to trigger innovation. And this is what this session is exciting. How can we use public procurement to trigger innovation? How can we use public procurement to create markets and shift a transformation that can help us even touch often 12% of global domestic product, and even sometimes at a global average, but in some countries it can really equal 30% or even 50%. In France, it's quite important, the power of the public purse. And this is about creating and enhancing public demand for decarbonization and circularity, but also building and working collaboratively with the private sector so that demands enables, guides, and incentivizes innovation, alternative solutions, and new businesses opportunities. With those introductory remarks, and now that we have really quite a wonderful audience ahead of us, I really want to particularly thank the organizers of this session. Number one, the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, Global ABC, the United Nations Environment Programme, who is providing important support to this forum, the Ministry of Ecological Transition and Territorial Cohesion, and the Ministry of Energy Transition in France. And also, at the end, I will recognize, of course, the partners and speakers. I have thus concluded my role as really I will be your master of ceremony for this session, and I have now really the pleasure and wonderful pleasure to invite our first speaker, who is Anne-Claire Howard, Director of Procurement Group at the United Nations Agency, UNOPS. UNOPS is a wonderful partner of the One Planet Network and a co-lead in our efforts in advancing sustainable public procurement, but also buildings and constructions agenda. Anne-Claire, welcome.
Thank you very much, and bonjour. Although I'm in my native country, I will be speaking English today. My name is Anne-Claire Howard. I'm the Director of Procurement at UNOPS. And we are mandated as a central resource in the UN system to provide infrastructure, procurement, and project management services. So you've already heard two pretty critical words in here, infrastructure, procurement. This is why I think today is particularly exciting for me, and I know people don't necessarily get very excited about procurement. We should probably do a slider around this, but I'll try and make it exciting. Now, I hope that if you're here, and that's my thinking, you already know how vital it is for us to decarbonize the global construction and building sector. This morning in plenary, for those of you who were there, a lot of very sobering numbers were shared, and it's very evident that we are not on track. So a quick reminder, because there's a lot of really crucial numbers around this. Material use has increased more than 3 times over the past 50 years. 26%, now we know this is debatable, of all GHG emissions come from construction and operations of the built environment. Buildings are responsible for 39% of global energy-related carbon emissions. And what we've heard as well is 80% of the growth in buildings is said to take place in emerging and developing economies. So not here, not in our neighboring countries, the global south, developing economies, where this growth is absolutely essential to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals. Globally, over 50% of the population lives in urban areas today. By 2045, the world's urban population will increase by 1.5 times. So we're going to be building more. We have to build better. So you understand the problem we need to solve: growing urban populations, increasing needs for services, infrastructure, affordable housing, whilst managing finite resources and a 1.5-degree scenario. And this is why public procurement is actually an essential tool into how we get there. Public procurement is on average 13 to 20% of GDP. That's a lot of money. Most countries spend about half of their public procurement expenditure on buildings and infrastructure. So in this area, the power, as you said, the power of the public purse is immense. It's probably one of the key driving forces as to how we actually achieve a sustainable built environment for all. We can influence everything from financing, planning, design, what type of construction is built, where it's built, how much is being built, how it's built, and influencing every stage of the value chain involves public procurement. We can decide what we procure, how we foster innovation in this marketplace. So how do you move from over-specifying to allowing the market to tell how to solve problems for you? We can decide to incentivize circularity. We have the rules to actually influence how these processes move forward. Now, I know the numbers were a little sobering, if not bleak, this morning, but many countries have started to look at how they can harness the power of public procurement and green public procurement to create meaningful change. In some of the sessions this morning, I'm sure you would have seen some of these initiatives. There's the Clean Energy Ministerial Industrial Decarbonization Initiative. I love these really long names, which become really funky acronyms, which is a global coalition of public and private organizations. And I emphasize that fact because it is about building that coalition between public and private. None of us can do it alone. The private sector on its own won't get there. The public sector on its own will certainly not get there. So how do we foster that collaboration? But we're very proud to be part of some of these initiatives. There's a lot that we can do. Now, I mentioned, and I'll close on this, increased urbanizations and the SDGs, which are words that we should be talking about. And as the Director of Procurement in a UN agency, which is focused on delivering procurement and infrastructure in some of the most fragile contexts in the world, the challenge is even more significant in those places. And we recognize that there's a huge challenge confronting the public sector on how we decarbonize the built environment, which is budget constraints. Resources are scarce, not just the material resources, but the financial resources at our disposal. The concerns around perceived cost effectiveness of green building initiatives. How can you convince stakeholders that the long-term benefits outweigh the immediate needs and outweigh the immediate costs? This requires training, capacity building, awareness raising. And how do we help these countries establish the appropriate procurement frameworks to support all of these endeavors? Sound public procurement, and this raises so many other underlying issues: corruption, abuse of power, abuse of influence. Public procurement that is sound is key to achieving decarbonization. But we need to understand the challenges ahead. So I'm really excited to hear our panelists speak today, because I hope that it can make all of you as equally excited about public procurement as I am. And it'll highlight the need for meaningful collaboration between public and private sector, which is fundamental. The growing importance of circularity. For those of you who were in a panel session earlier, this is a really important topic into how we can get to achieving these outcomes. Outcomes-focused procurement, which is really important as well to foster that innovation that I spoke about, and many other ideas and solutions on how we can truly leverage, as the session says, the power of public procurement to achieve our objectives. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the panel.
Thank you very much, and Claire. And I think by now we have heard about the what is the challenge. We have also heard about the why, and there are two components in which we will devote the rest of this hour, and this is the how and the who. And for this discussion, in which we will hear views and perspectives from governments, policymakers, private sector actors, and academia on what are the tools and the solutions to move fast and together to unlock the potential of public procurement for decarbonizing the building and construction sector, I am pleased to invite our moderator and also organizational partner in the work that the One Planet Network does, Mr. Paolo Maghina, who's the Deputy Head of Division Infrastructure and Public Procurement at the OECD, who will be our moderator and will introduce our speakers for today. Paolo. Welcome.
Thank you, Jorge. And good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. We will try to speed up because we have speakers, a long list of speakers, and some of them have other commitments. We already heard about the relevance of procurement and why procurement matters. And thank you, Jorge and Claire, for highlighting how procurement is a crucial pillar of strategic governance and public services delivery. In fact, it's the most relevant single activity a government can carry that impacts citizens and the well-being. So, and for that, we have to know how and who. That are the questions we are going to answer now. And I would like to put a question to you before starting the panel. And the question to the audience is, in your opinion, which of the following is or are the most important actors in terms of procurement when it comes to supporting decarbonization buildings? And you can pick two of the options there. So procurement practitioners, decision makers and managers, regulatory bodies, economic operators, the private sector, or the end users and beneficiaries of the buildings that are being constructed. see still a couple of people voting, but we are getting close to the end. Okay, let's close the poll. So decision makers are coming on top with regulatory bodies. Interesting. Practitioners only 32%, then economic operators, and then the end users 9%. Okay. Okay, let's call the panel now. I would like to invite to the stage Dr. Henry Kwabena Kokofu, the Executive Director of the Environmental Protection Agency of Ghana, Ms. Sarah Koval, high-level expert of the Direction des Immobiliers de l'État, the French State Property Directorate, Ms. Cassie Sutherland, the Managing Director of the Climate Solutions and Networks from the C40, Ms. Lena Hoek, the Executive Vice President of Skanska, Sustainability and Innovation, Ms. Joanna Pirinen, from Stora Enso, Senior Vice President of Sustainability Wood Products, Mr. Fen Crestas, the Head of Directorate for Buildings, Policy, Climate Protection and Sustainability from the Federal Buildings in the German Federal Ministry for Housing, Urban Development and Buildings. And finally, Toby Morgan, a Senior Manager of the Built Environment, the Climate Group. Okay, so we have a very interesting panel. And I will start by asking a question to Henry. So if you can enlighten us, Henry, how can national governments use their purchasing power to encourage better planning, design and operations of sustainable, net zero and inclusive public buildings? 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, moderator. We are very much pleased to be here, to be part of this important program. It is a fact that Ghana, where I'm coming from, is part of the developing countries and emerging one as such. And if you like to know, it's very much in the climate vulnerability bracket alongside other developing countries. So loss and damage through climate impacted events have been quite with us. So if you are talking about construction and reconstruction, the future belongs to our place. Straight to your question, the procurement of Public Procurement Act, Act 663, as amended by Act 914 of 2016, has incorporated a criterion for all tenders to possess the necessary technical and environmental capabilities. In Ghana, we are very much into circularity, sustainability, as part of this criteria. And so we define the environmental and social performance standards that prospective suppliers must meet. Because the government is the largest purchaser, has the largest purse in this procurement strategy, the government intends to develop sustainable building standards by developing and publishing guidelines for sustainable, net zero, and inclusive public buildings. It will also ensure that these guidelines align with international best practices and standards, thereby promoting energy efficiency, renewable energy use, and accessibility. The third point is that now this area is very gray, given the fledgling construction economy within our space. Individuals who are currently in the sector would need to be built up by way of capacity, training, and other programs. So procurement officials, architects, and contractors do have to enhance the understanding of sustainable building practices, and again foster collaboration with relevant professional associations and educational institutions. In order to foster further, there is a plan to implement life cycle cost assessment methodologies to evaluate the long-term economics, environmental, and social impacts of different building options and encourage the use of sustainable materials and construction techniques that contribute to the overall net zero goal. Watching the polls and me coming from a regulatory body, I also happy that regulatory bodies was cool first in the polls, because we're talking about climate situations, environment, and all that. There is the need to always make sure the environmental protection is upheld and the climate principles or the conversation are very much adhered to. There is a group at Africa Continental Engineering and Construction Network. These are international sustainability built environment group, and they are doing whatever they can to meet the world standards. So for now, we are very much on course, and given our economic situation and the developmental agenda, the transformative way we want to get things done, it is very, very important that some of these things are looked at if you are to succeed in the fight against climate change, and then also reach the 1.5 degrees Celsius. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry. And thanks for bringing so diverse list of important topics, from the legal framework to standards to building capacity, methodologies, and so on. I would like now to ask a question to Sarah. Regarding the size and the variety of the French state properties, what are the main challenges you face and how do you tackle them? And what is the role of procurement to respond to these challenges? Please.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this session. Maybe first of all, broadly speaking, French state real estate, it's 94 million square meters. So it's quite a huge real estate, and it's various. We have offices, housing, teaching premises, military barracks, historical monuments. But another way of presenting it, it's 16 terawatt-hour final energy consumption each year. So obviously we have to meet all the regulations and all the targets that are set at a national or European level, and there are many targets. But really, if I summarize, we have two main goals. Of course, carbon neutrality to 2050, but also the upgrading and modernizing of the work environment for public services. And it's really important, and I just want to emphasize that one of our main objectives also it's to intensify the use of the buildings. And we have set a goal of reducing by 25% the offices premises by in 10 years. So it's really important, and obviously we have to modernize the work environment when we do so. Also said that adaptation to climate change is also crucial alongside with mitigation measures, and we have set a rule that no public investment will be made into renovation construction that does not take into account the adaptation criteria. So the need for investment is colossal. So we have to choose, obviously, the right investment plan before even trying to find the best way to implement it and the best way to finance it. And to find the best investment plans, it's really important to set the long-term patrimonial strategies. So it can be difficult. It can be difficult to have all the data and to anticipate the change in use in the buildings, but it's strategic to have a long-term strategies. And for that, the need for data collection and data use is crucial, really. So we have already several investment plans that are completed or underway for more than maybe 6,000 projects, and that is saving 1 terahour consumption. So you see there's more to do in the next years. And obviously we are trying to use all the techniques, energy mix, optimization of energy systems, work on facade, on roofing, deep retrofit. But the ground rule that we have is really that we try to reuse or repurpose the existing building, because we need to build less. We've said that, and new buildings should be the exception to the rule. And of course, we have also the targets with circularity, and we have targets with bio-based material. I think that by 2030, 25% of our public procurement should contain bio-based material. So it's really important. And obviously, to do that, we have to set and entertain the dialogue with the professional federations, because obviously, and that has been said, we can't do it alone. And solutions and especially solutions to renovate ancient building, which needs innovative solutions, must come from private sector. Maybe to finish, one word about also the financing strategy. Of course, we have to rationalize and really choose the best and the most efficient spending, and we also have to choose the right contractual public procurement. And maybe regarding to the operation, maybe it's beneficial to aggregate operation, to have a larger scale, and just say also that when it comes to energy in the build stock, the long-term energy performance contracts are really, really useful tool. And also we need, like others, to reduce upfront capital cost, and by using third-party financing. So it's the private sector that finance the retrofit, the renovation, and the public reimburse long-term when and if the energy savings occur. So it's also obviously a really important tool. Just say that maybe energy cost saving in deep retrofits represent maybe 5 to 20% of the amount of the investment. So also we try to find the creation of value when we undergo the investment. And to finish, just I would like to say that international cooperation is really important, because we find important to share best practices. We are really committed with the Public Real Estate Network, and we are undertaking a European benchmark on energy efficiency in public buildings. So cooperation and international exchanges are very useful tool and are very significant. Thank you.
Merci, Sarah. Thanks for bringing these ambitious targets, and for those of you that are not aware, this is part of a broader commitment from the French government, the Loi de Climat et Résilience, the new climate and resilient law in France, mandates all public procurement to have environmental criteria from 2026, so it will be a challenge. I will now turn to Casey, and I will ask you what are the key ways cities can leverage the power of public procurement for building decarbonization, and do you have examples from the C40 that you can share with us? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thanks for having me today. So C40 is a network of nearly 100 of the world's largest cities, representing around 700 million people around the world. I think there might be a map on the next slide, if we can go to that one. So you can see this. So you can play a geography quiz and see if you can name that city. I'm getting pretty good at it now, so that is part of my job. So 600 million residents and 27% of the global economy. So it really is the large cities of the world. And the purpose of C40 being that the mayors of these cities have all come together to commit to take bold, ambitious climate action. And you hope across that scale there will be some kind of global improvement, and we'll see, a reduction of emissions and increase in climate resilience, and also then a kind of ripple effect across other cities who can learn, take examples, copy the actions of these cities. So I say all of that to also say there's a huge amount of public procurement across these cities, and to the points earlier on about how do we leverage that power of this public procurement. And what we try and do across C40 is have some actions supported in cities where they're taking that action, and then share it around and kind of inspire the other cities to take that on. So I think it provides a good basis for some of these great examples we've heard already of leading actions that can be taken on public procurement, the close relationship with the private sector, and really how at city government level, where they have maybe direct ownership and operation of quite large parts of infrastructure, of asset bases, as well as then kind of wider supply chains, how we can really harness those. So I think it allows cities to kind of lead the way. I think it also allows that kind of integration of many aspects that also you mentioned around not only looking at emissions reductions here when we're looking at public procurement, but also resilience of those built environment assets and infrastructure, I would add. And that, of course, is necessary for cities to be thinking about as well, because they've got to keep things running in the city. We always talk about mayors being on the front line of incidents and issues that happen in cities. And so it's vital to them that the resilience of the assets and direct related goods of public procurement remain resilient. But also, I think, for this conversation, it's really a way of us also including wider important parts of the just transition as well. And so integrating, training, reskilling of workers, working with existing workforces and training those, and also bringing in new elements such as deconstruction of materials, sourcing new materials. So that's also an area that we're really seeing across cities, and that kind of innovation. To give maybe a few examples of where we're seeing some of these, so I listed out here, the kind of three elements that I think cities can really take a hold of. They can demonstrate innovation and leadership, global city action, and working in partnership. And maybe on that first one around innovation and leadership, a good example on that market transformation and impact, I think, is in Oslo, where Oslo was looking to develop zero-emission construction machinery, larger machinery, the big diggers. I'm not a construction expert, so I'll use digger, excavator probably is the right word, isn't it? And so, yes, thank you, Lena. She's written a note, by the way, to talk to me afterwards about that. But anyway, they wanted to really kind of start to have across the city, tackle noise pollution, air pollution, starting to bring online electric excavators. So they started with public procurement contracts and requiring this through public procurement contracts. The machinery didn't really exist. It was a bit disruptive in the market. But then I heard, about a year after this happened on the major renovation of a road in the middle of Oslo, and electric machinery was used, that then when you went to the kind of trade association meetings and gatherings at a national level, you started to see a huge increase and maybe half of the products on the market being electric. So it really shows that kind of influence as well. The city did what they could directly control, but it had a wider market influence. And I really think that's a power of cities. And leading on to that global city action, I think really those taking things like setting deconstruction targets, prioritising use of existing buildings and materials, cities such as Amsterdam and London are putting in place at the moment, where they've started to bake that into whole life carbon assessments, but also really asking for an assessment across what are the existing assets that could be used here to put that in place. And maybe to add working in partnership, I've mentioned a little bit, but to bring in on from the energy point of view as well, I think this is really an area cities can lead the way. There's a great example in Melbourne around a power purchase agreement where they aggregated demand not only across municipal buildings and assets, but also other services across the city, and so ended up with a big impact there and huge new renewable energy centre just outside the city. But we're also seeing a number of cities starting to look at 24/7 carbon-free energy systems. And so how can they really end up with carbon-free energy 24 hours of the day, 7 days a week? And of course, that requires a lot of working in partnership, being able to introduce flexibility and storage into the system, and really, to bring us back to the buildings point, utilising the assets that are on the system. And the built environment provides a huge opportunity for that, for demand-side response, for increased energy efficiency. And so I think using something like a 24/7 carbon-free energy approach to have an impact through wider procurement and wider benefits. So that's a brief world tour of a few examples, but I have plenty more if you want them. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Casey. It's interesting to see, and cities are probably some of the most promising innovators in the world, as we know. And 60% of procurement in OECD countries, our 38 member countries, is coming from the subnational level. So it's very important that we also understand the power of cities and regions. I will turn now to Lena, just in time. Maybe you can share with us some good examples of public procurement incentivizes the decarbonization of buildings and the built environment coming from the private sector, and what is needed to scalate circular and innovative solutions to decarbonize buildings.
Yes, I would love to. And so for those of you who has not met Skanska before, we are amongst the largest international construction and development companies. And we are very heavily involved in driving the sustainability agenda in the markets where we are at, and also how to make sure that we are transferring that kind of knowledge. And it was so great to hear these examples, both from Cassie and also coming from Anne-Claire, regarding actually infrastructure. You can hear and you can feel how cool it is. And just to prove my point, Fast Company, I don't know if you know the business paper, the newspaper, Fast Company. So it's kind of a tech news. Actually has on its news just yesterday the pilot we are doing in Los Angeles, an electric excavator in Los Angeles in the LA metro area. And how we come up with that was actually due to the fact that in the Nordics as well as in the UK, we have quite a lot of starting to see in public procurement questions regarding performance or requirements when it comes to both embodied carbon as well as how to be able to do much more efficient construction site or fossil-free construction site. So that means either you electrify the heavy machinery, including the excavators, or you go for biofuels. And foremost, you also make sure that you are much, much more efficient with how you are operating the whole machinery. And by that, we're actually using AI solutions in order to make sure that we do not have idle time. So it's also an aspect of efficiency or productivity here, as well as of course, saving a bit of carbon. So in all of this, public procurement are really key in how they are asking and demanding for these kinds of new concepts, new innovations, and try them out on site. For Skanska, about half of our revenue actually comes from public procurement. So this is not a small piece for us if it is going to be changed. And seeing this happening in certain markets, and just to do a shout out for one of the C40 cities, the city of Stockholm, we were actually having this very visionary procurement where they asked for us, how much could you achieve? How could you perform as a fossil-free construction site? What would it take? And what we actually did come up with there was a partnership together with Volvo Group when it comes to electrifying the excavators, as well as the partnership with the client, the Stockholm City. And doing the whole groundwork of how to making all this happen was actually the starting point for the pilot in Los Angeles as well, because as we actually understood how to do it in the Nordics, we thought, let's try to pilot it also in the US. And that's how you make infrastructure cool, and having Fast Company talk about it. But going back then to when we say the importance of asking for new methodologies or being open for actually driving innovation when it comes to public procurement, it's important to ask for the performance. And that also means coming back to standards and measurements. So just also to state, we had some previous sessions, there's been a lot of sharing that there are new standards, but also new databases being shared. Both Ramboll and Arup are actually launching open source databases on how they are measuring carbon emissions in the projects they are doing. Skanska, we have done something similar. We started off more than 5 years ago when we were looking into embodied carbon in US. It was really hard to measure. So we set about to actually transfer knowledge, the environmental product declarations from our Nordic business. We transferred them to the US and we built this embodied construction carbon calculator, a tool for how to, and also database with about 100,000 EPDs today. We made it open source, and that's how it became 100,000, because when we had about 10,000 EPDs, we thought it was plenty, and we made it open source, and all of a sudden, now it's more than 100,000, so the greatness of open source. And if you are Googling this, please write EC3 and then carbon or construction or something, because it's also an acronym for bodybuilders. So I want to get on the right side here. And just to end up here, how important it is that all of us that do have a bit of these kind of competences, but also that we share and we put standards in place, and we do it open source. Actually, last year, going back then to public procurement, all agencies in the state of New York actually all agreed upon that they would start to have requirements in their public procurement when it comes to construction. And those requirements are ISO 14001 certifications. It is the EC3 tool on embodied carbon calculations, tracking the embodied carbon. It's using the Envision standard or certification for infrastructure, as well as showing how you can use electrified equipment, and also having low carbon concrete specifications. So that is quite a major shift. And also the importance to see states, regions or cities making a move. It really helps the whole sector. So that's it.
Thank you, Lena, and you have to leave us. But thank you so much for
Thank
bringing all these relevant points. And by now, those in the room already know that it takes two to tango. And procurement is not only exciting, but also sexy, and infrastructure is cool. So a lot of things to take back home. Now I would like to ask Joanna a question. What are the key ways you see governments addressing green public procurement? Are they giving this topic the urgency and importance it deserves? And there are some examples that you can share with us of incentives you see as helpful to mainstream markets for low emission. Thank you.
Thank you, and happy to be here. It kind of combines two of my passions, which other one is sustainable transformation and what businesses can do there, and then sourcing sustainability or procurement sustainability as a kind of really utilizing the purchasing power for good. Maybe shortly about Stora Enso, as it might not be that well known for many. We are company listed in Sweden and Finland, providing bio-based materials. We are basically utilizing this also for packaging, etc. But of course, today, what is relevant is the wood products business and really mass timber solutions and wood construction solutions that we offer. We are the largest sawn wood producer in Europe and basically leading provider of sustainable wood-based building solutions. And of course, being proud that we have had the full value chain from government to city to construction company, and then here me presenting one of the construction materials and solutions. So it's so important that we have the full chain and talking about this topic. And maybe one confession, wooden construction is still totally niche. When you look back into the history, you think that we humans, that's what we first utilized for shelter. But currently in Europe, it's estimated to be 2.4%. And then you can imagine that when we are so much welcoming French commitment to push it forward, and also all of the cities who are putting a carbon limit in when they are tendering, because that kind of levels the playing field. But there it comes also to this topic that if you over-specify from the beginning, if you put that you want to have green concrete, it's a little hard to have a timber solution as option. But there are so many low emission materials available, and when you would have rather, I have a need, here is a limit, then you can have the different alternatives. And also what Lena was mentioning, this dialogue, because quite often in public procurement, people are a little bit like, we can't discuss, it's very, transparent, it's clear, it's standardized in that set that it's fair. But in most of the frameworks in public procurement, nothing hinders market dialogue, actually asking from the different players that, hey, I have a need for this use case, what would be your solution? And then you come up with these cool collaborations that Lena was mentioning and getting those out there. And you were asking if, do I see enough movement from government? So yes and no. There is plenty of good things happening and nice movement, but is it enough? I think we have today already here felt the sense of urgency and everyone desperate to speed up. In a previous session in this room, there was a little bit like we need to start acting. Luckily, I a little bit see that we are already acting, but it's just a matter of like, how can we fast forward this and make it so much faster? So that's where it really much comes then to the public procurement also. When I've been heading sourcing sustainability in the private sector, I've been always preaching that with great power comes great responsibility, my favorite quote, directly from Spider-Man movie. But, procurement holds the money, and money is power. So that's why it should be cleverly utilized and very for driving this market transformation that is so needed. I probably have used my 5 minutes. I would have tons of things to say more, but I really think that public procurement, looking at the buildings, really having those, don't only have a monetary budget, but have a carbon budget. And when you would have this dual currency at your hands and have that as a driving force, then we can do something good for the planet and have amazing buildings to work and go to school and have a healthcare and everything. So thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Thank you very much. Yes. It's the relevance of market dialogue and having the collaboration. I think it's very important that we are aware of that. I will now turn to Germany and to Mr. Feen Krestas. So how the public sector can support the transition of hard to abate sectors such as steel and cement and contribute to the achievement of national and international climate targets. The floor is yours.
So,
thank you.
Just saying hello to everybody, and I'm glad to be here. And I'm tempted to continue from what you've said, and I really like not putting out to hesitate, put distinct material requirements like certain CO2 emissions with cement in the bidding process, as opposed to go more for a general goal of CO2 emission with the entire building, because that's much more open to inventive solutions. And that brings me to I think the important terms of a life cycle on the one hand, not to think about just the phase of using a building, but also to build a building and the end of living of the building, number one, and then circularity with these building products. But going back to my notes here, I was asked to say something about public procurement with public buildings and what Germany is doing, how Germany is approaching these things. First of all, we nationally committed to be carbon neutral in 2045 across all sectors, which obviously includes public procurement and construction. The Federal Climate Change Act, adopted by the federal government of Germany in 2019 recognizes green procurement as a main element. So what are we doing specifically? First of all, we defined a standard for every newly built construction on the federal level in 2013, which with an assessment system for sustainable buildings, and the key factor there is CO2 emission, and so every building needs to meet the silver standard. It also includes some other criterias like accessibility for disabled and other things. But the key thing is CO2 emission life cycle assessment. So we developed a tool for doing these life cycle assessments for emissions from the use of materials such as cement and steel throughout the entire process of the use of these buildings. As I already emphasized, this entire life cycle assessment is key to understand what individual solutions contribute to the success of the entire building as a system. According to the Federal Climate Change Act, when planning, selecting and implementing investments and purchasing, the federal government examines how the investment can contribute to achieving the national climate action goals, especially the climate neutrality goal of 2045. If several implementation options are possible, preference should be given to those that enable emissions reducing over the entire life cycle at the lowest cost. That's that sounds like bureaucracy, but that's a crucial decision made, that it's not only about costing, and it's also about the quality in terms of climate neutrality. I'm sure in every country there are regulations existing how money should be spent, and it should be efficient. And if there's this is distinctively introducing the category of climate neutrality into these categories beyond just being cheap. What we are now doing is further developing this assessment system for sustainable buildings towards even more focusing on climate neutrality for federal buildings, but also providing the system for all public buildings. The idea obviously is to encourage demand for products, for building methods, and to go into this process with a technologically neutral approach. I'm very sympathizing with wood, but I always emphasize in these situations. I also love CO2 emission neutral concrete, if it's there. We need to foster that market and to challenge that market, because we as a government don't have all the solutions, and but we can, through that procurement processes, can start and also at least indirectly finance these processes in the industry. The industry processes also are challenged by CO2 emission pricing, obviously, and we help these things by funding programs to the industry so they can change their way how to manufacture steel and concrete and things. and other products with high greenhouse emission content during the process. Well, there's lots more to say, but I think there should be room for discussion also.
Okay. Thank you. We shouldn't compromise, and it's interesting to see how green procurement is a main element to address climate action goals and other commitments. And in fact, for those of you that are not aware, the OECD launched a survey, and we are going to publish a policy brief on green procurement. And it's interesting to see that 2/3 of our countries changed their regulations and strategies in the last 3 years to align them with international commitments. So the last speaker, we heard from a wide range of different stakeholders that are relevant to public procurement, but I would like to ask Toby, what is the climate group doing to engage with the public sector on building decarbonization?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Really good to be here. I'm at the slight disadvantage of going last, so I'll try and keep things fresh and try not to cover too many points that we've already heard from the other speakers. But yeah, we would fully agree that the public sector can really showcase that leadership in building decarbonisation. It's really key, as we heard as well from the private sector, from Skanska. It also is key to unlocking that private sector financing that we massively need. In Europe, there's a huge gap from all the Fit for 55 packages. I think decarbonising building is the one where it's the biggest financing gap between what is available through various schemes and what is actually required. I think it's like 267 billion euro or something like that. So huge amounts of private financing capital that we really need to unlock, so the public sector can really help engaging with the private sector. And also, one thing that can really help is setting those high standards, as France have done, as Germany have done, and that can really help unlock that financing as well. So that's where I see a really big aspect of this. And as we saw from the session earlier with the opening plenary, we're not going fast enough. In fact, we're going backwards. Emissions from building are rising, so it's hugely worrying. We need to halve emissions by the end of this century, by 2030. Sorry, end of the decade, not the end of the century. And currently, we're not on track to do that. So, would implore everyone in the room who has responsibility to do as much as they can on this, and setting those high standards can really help as a first step. And I think with the public sector as well, they can also really showcase their leadership by doing their own buildings, their own municipal buildings, their hospitals, their schools, their public housing, whatever it is. So really showcasing, talking the talk and walking the walk at the same time. Yeah, so Climate Group, some of you will be aware of who we are, but we're a international NGO. We're headquartered in the UK, but we work globally, and we work with both the private sector and subnational governments to drive climate action fast. And we try to bring together those networks of corporates, of subnational governments on various climate initiatives. So I lead the work on built environment and energy efficiency. So we run a number of corporate campaigns, including EP100, which I head up, RE100, which lots of you would have heard of. Also our colleagues from the industry team are here as well, so Steel Zero, Concrete Zero. We've heard a lot about that in these sessions. So how do we decarbonise those raw materials that are going into our buildings? So yeah, we're trying to tackle it from the private sector. And then we also run a large government network of subnationals, so the Under 2 Coalition. So we've got 270 different subnational governments around the world which we engage with on climate issues. And one thing that we can really do on this is bring together those networks, because I think the governments, the subnational governments, the city level governments that Cassie works with, do need that capacity building. So, they might just have one person in the whole of the government looking after buildings. So we really need to bring the private sector knowledge in with the public sector and do that capacity building work, showcase best practice, and also look at some of the more innovative financing solutions that are really available and out there. So starting to look at things like circular procurement. So you're not necessarily paying for bits of equipment, you're paying for a service. So it could be, you know, energy efficiency, it could be decarbonisation, it could be lighting, whatever. So yeah, those innovative financing models that can really help with the public-private sort of partnerships and really showcasing leadership there. We've just launched a new campaign for Climate Group as well called Renovation Revolution. So we're working with a number of our private sector partners working across the built environment and also engaging with those under 2 states within Europe specifically to do some capacity building, awareness raising. And I think how we can really engage with those, with the public sector is really highlighting the additional socioeconomic benefits that are really key, because you know we can be slightly guilty of us energy people and buildings people of getting a bit too geeky and technical and nerdy and talking about, you know, K values and U values and tons of CO2. But if we really get across those additional benefits, so it's not just about saving carbon, which is, you know, completely vital, but it's good for energy security. You know, we've just come through a huge energy crisis in Europe. It's good for jobs. It creates lots of jobs. If we retrofit our building, it's a huge jobs creation machine. So we can really engage with the governments, with the public sector on these additional elements. You know, on the residential side, my background is in housing and doing domestic energy efficiency projects. Coming from the UK, it's a bit depressing as we've got the worst performing stock probably in Europe, if not the world. And that can have massive health benefits as well. So if you invest in energy efficiency, in retrofitting, you're saving carbon, but you're also helping tackle health inequalities, housing inequalities. So there's all these additional benefits that we really need to raise the profile. And we often forget the most important part of buildings are the people inside them. So how do we raise those issues and bring forward the human element of buildings, which can sometimes be lost in all the technical chat. So yeah, really happy to be here. I will wrap up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you very much. Okay, I think we covered a lot during the session, and we talked about all the options that are available to practitioners and to the private and the public sector to interact, how we can bring circularity, decarbonization, energy sovereignty, and so on. I have the same question that I put at the beginning of the session for you to answer again, to see if your perception changed because of the interaction and the discussion, and if you feel that...
It allows for multiple answers?
Yes, 2. Yes. So if you could vote again quickly. I know we are a little bit behind schedule, but we still have a few minutes. Also for a bit of interaction with you, I was told that there is a microphone here, so I will invite you to yeah. Thanks. Couple of questions. Okay. Interesting to see these results. Maybe we didn't hear enough from the practitioners in the panel, because we work a lot at OECD with public procurement practitioners, and we see the need for capability and capacity building a lot, and we are working a lot on professionalization of the public procurement function, which is also a very important work stream for OECD and non-OECD countries. Okay, we can close. So decision makers and regulatory bodies, they keep the lead as before, and now with a bit more even prominence. So, okay, thank you so much. So I think we have like 5 minutes, if Jorge allows me to, for questions. So anyone in the room asking a question? I see a hand up there at the very bottom, very end of the
There
room.
are some microphones here. Sir, please come and introduce yourself or ask your question.
Thank you for the presentation and all the experiences which has been provided. I'm Idris Katrada. I work as an environmental consultant, and I'm here representing FEDIC, which is the International Federation of Consulting Engineers. we heard that when there is a wish to introduce a carbon budget, there is a need to quantify this carbon along the whole life cycle. And I would like to understand if you have the same methodology which is used to assess this footprint, or if you have different methodologies, and depending on also on the methodologies, which is the database you use? Is it a common database, or is it are there different databases? Thank you.
I don't know who from the panel wants to take this question. Sarah, maybe?
Yes. I don't think that we have the one only and common tool to address the carbon life cycle. It's a really, of course, it's a really important issue. We are trying to develop in France, and as I said, we are undergoing European benchmark. So it's probably we are going to look into the German the German tools, which could be very interesting. But yes, it's important maybe to share ground rules, but I'm not sure that we can have one and only one tool for everyone.
Any, please.
Well, that's a very important question, first of all. And we are dealing with an international market of building products, obviously. And no, I don't know whether anybody here in the room is aware of the CPR process on the EU level right now. That's the important thing there, which qualities of the products are declared and with which methods, and that's a norming issue, and it's, well, let's put it like that, it's extremely complicated, and the regulatory body is very important in this. And then beyond that, if you have a building product, how to include this in the life cycle assessment. Again, you need to have certain standards, and I have to admit we are struggling nationally to have one standard. And I'm really looking forward to exchange experiences with France. I know you're doing things there too. And since we are dealing with an international building product market, and the building industry isn't that international as the building product market, but it's to a certain degree also international, and the planning industry also. So it's really important to have a common point of reference. We have built with great effort for years and years Öko-Baudat. That's a database, and that's governmentally done, and we include EPBDs there, and it's a long time struggle, and there definitely needs to be more done.
Okay, and I think Joanna wants to contribute.
Yeah, I would like to maybe a little bit continue on this one. So actually preaching the previous session in this room, which was about whole life carbon. And one of the important things, and then also coming to EU construction product regulations, so CPR, the life cycle analysis methodology is also a little bit varied when you are looking at the kind of construction material, or you're looking at the full building level and what you are doing there. But about CPR, the EU regulation for construction products, and the whole life carbon discussion on the previous, so third-party verified environmental product declarations that are based on LCI. Those are kind of from materials perspective, and they are the level playing field that exactly you can stay material neutral, and you are comparing based on third-party verified.
Yeah.
And then on a buildings level, I think it's interesting what France is doing with the dynamic LCA that kind of brings then the kind of benefits, and depending on the use case, and it brings the time perspective in it. So I'm afraid I don't have a simple answer to what methodology, but I would like to bring that kind of science there, and that specific for materials, but then on the buildings level also look at scientific based.
May I make a brief remark?
Very quickly. So.
The perfect is sometimes in the way of the good. And so most probably there's a meeting of experts here in the room, and we are thinking about where we could do, go and what we could do. And outside in the construction market, there's tons and tons of people who didn't have a clue. And we don't have to lose all of them.
Yeah. Very, very good. I think we are ending the session. Just to let you know that OECD is starting a working group on measuring the impact of carbon on procurement. And I hope that we will be able to provide a framework that countries can use to understand the impact of procurement in terms of carbon. And with that, I would like to invite the panelists to leave the stage, but to also appreciate your work.
Thank you very much, and can we have a round of applause for our wonderful moderator and partner, Paulo Aguina, and to our panelists. Before we conclude, we have just, please stay here, we have two important messages also from a leadership perspective. The first concluding message is by Mr. Mervyn Jones, who is a Senior Advisor of Circular Economy, Ministry of Infrastructure and Water of the Netherlands, who will be followed by Mr. Harri Hakaste, who is Senior Architect, Ministry of Environment of Finland. Mervyn, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jorge, and thank you, delegates. This is only going to take a very, very short period of time. I'm not going to try and repeat anything that our wonderful speakers actually said. What I'm going to try and do is summarize it from a perspective of the procurement sector. Number one, a lot of people in the audience put their hands up and said they've been involved in a tender exercise. The involvement in procurement is far wider than just the purchasing and the tendering. And I think this is a really important point to remember. When we're talking with stakeholders in the industry, we have to remember that the procurement cycle starts at the pre-tender stage, which means that I'm not surprised by the results on that survey that Paulo put up, because the procurement practitioners are often locked in by the decision makers' decisions in that pre-tender stage. So we have to influence those pre-tender decision makers. And they have to recognise their roles and their responsibilities within the wider procurement cycle. The procurement practitioners can challenge, but they can only challenge in terms of the types of approaches that they take. Those approaches, again, are typically locked in early, whether it's design build, fund, operate, or whether it's design, build, maintain, public-private partnership. These decisions are often taken outside of the procurement function itself. So we need to embrace that wider group of stakeholders in the procurement cycle. Also, no standard is going to get put into a template, is going to get put into a specification or a requirement. And no target or measurement or monitoring or reporting is going to happen if we don't then make sure that those requirements are embedded into the contracts and are followed through in terms of monitoring reporting. So we need to involve the contract managers. They're also part of the procurement cycle. So pre-tender, tender, and post-tender are the procurement cycle. If you don't, your colleagues don't recognise that, please go and make sure that they do recognise their roles and responsibilities. Next question. Again, Christus mentioned that in Germany with 2045, they've got a target for carbon neutral. And he said, and of course this includes procurement. My first call for action is saying, actually, when we measure the carbon footprint of organisations, particularly in the public sector, including Scope 3 emissions, which is where procurement sits, is the exception rather than the rule at the moment. We need to include measurement of Scope 3. Why? Scope 1 and Scope 2 typically account for around 15% in public sector organisations. Scope 3, therefore, 85%. Simple mathematics. We say 15% of our Scope 1 and 2 emissions, we make an overall carbon footprint saving of about 2.25%. If we do that same 15% within the procurement, which is the vast majority of Scope 3, we're saving pretty close to 13%. So by not measuring Scope 3, we really are burying our head in the sand and we really are ignoring the elephant in the room. So measure scope 3 as a number 1 commitment. Number 2 is we then need to work collaboratively. We've talked a lot about capacity building. There's a lot of initiatives going on, and I'm going to have to read from this because it's quite... What we're calling on you to do now is to commit to action. It's not just about putting something in policy, it's about translating that into practice. So, for example, through the new One Planet Network flagship initiative on mainstreaming circularity in the construction sector by leveraging public procurement. And it's that power of public procurement that's key. Procurement is not a neutral mechanism. So by definition, if we're not being proactive and ensuring that we're embedding criteria, requirements, that we're choosing the right procurement processes and approaches, and we're not involving the right people in the pre-tender stage, by definition, if we're not being proactive, we're going to be reactive and we're going to have a negative impact. So it's not a neutral tool. So we need to use it proactively. And the initiative, the Global ABC initiative, is run jointly with the OPN, the One Planet Network Sustainable Public Procurement Programme. And its commitment is to develop action pathways at a national and a local government level. So what we're calling on you here is now to commit to joining that we actually commit to producing these pathways, but also that we look then to embed requirements and technical requirements and tender criteria into our contracts, because it's no use having a standard or a policy if we're not following it through into practice. And in order to do that, as some of the speakers have said, we need to build capacity. And that capacity is not just in terms of empowering the procurement function, but again, it comes back to ensuring that these decision makers within the wider procurement cycle understand and are involved and are being proactive in their role. So on that note, I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll pass over to Harry if he's here.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Okay, thank you. I try to be brief. It was very interesting to hear all the comments from the whole supply chain of built environment today. Our government, Finnish government, is committed to decarbonize our building stock. And we have already kind of accepted a new Construction Act 1 year ago, where we are introducing climate declaration with limit values. And in our system, this procurement, I think that this is the kind of thing that we put above this legislation. In this legislation, which will enter into force next year, we will kind of have the limit of the new buildings, but above that we need procurement, and we have heard very good examples how to do it today. I have to continue what Mervyn said. In this forum, there has been a presentation of 10 whole life cycle recommended actions, and I would like to highlight the action number 7, which is called Drive Investment. And it says, drive investment into near-zero buildings by developing and championing policies that increase the market demand for low-carbon solutions and near-zero buildings, and by leading by example with whole life carbon requirements in public procurements. We've heard today already that money is the main issue that we have to consider also. I also think that in European countries, the regulation is very, very important, but I understand that in the global south, for example, public procurement has a very, very crucial role. Just maybe finally, I would like to say something about the importance of the international cooperation based on our experiences. As I said, we have been developing our own regulation, but at the same time, other Nordic countries have been doing the same. And we have a very close cooperation between Nordic countries. We have had steady kind of meetings between us, and in these meetings we have told our experiences how we are going to implement this new legislation. And in these meetings we have also told that what we are going to do next, and it has been very interesting to hear. And if someone tells that, for example, Sweden tells that now we are going to do that, others somehow consider that we have to do better than that. So all Nordic countries, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and even Iceland are now providing new declarations and new regulations regarding decarbonization. But of course, and this is something like a very sound competition between Nordic countries. But of course, in the end, we all know that it's not the competition between countries. No, it's much more important. It's a competition for our common globe, and it's against time. And this competition, we can still win, or we can lose. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry, for those remarks, and really to thank the enabling support of the governments of the Netherlands and the governments of Finland, who have been instrumental in creating the space that was announced, which is a flagship initiative powered by the One Planet Network, which is entitled Mainstreaming Circularity in the Construction Sector, leveraging the power of the public procurement. And I want to ask my colleague Fabienne Pierre to raise her hand in case your organization, she's here and she is enabling this with a number of colleagues, in case your organization is interested in supporting, participating, or being a member of this flagship initiative, which just started a couple of months ago, please reach out to us, myself, Fabienne, or other colleagues that spoke today, to be part of this, because definitely there's a gap. On my side, what I learned is I knew that public procurement was powerful, but I learned that it is also cool. And why is it cool? Why? Because it helps us create a space for learning, it helps us innovate, it helps us raise the bar and ambition, but also lower the cost. It also helps us improve that market dialogue and that cooperation that is needed, not only at the regional level, but across all the actors of the procurement life cycle. So I really want to thank all our speakers, all our panelists, and the organizations that have made this possible, especially UNOPS, sister agency, UNIDO, the OECD, C40, Stora Enso, Skanska, EPA Ghana, the French State Public Property Directorate, DIE, the German Ministry for Housing, Urban Development and Building, the Climate Group, who spoke today, the Ministry of Environment of Finland, the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management of the Netherlands, and of course, the organizers of this important forum, Global ABC, UNEP, and the Ministry of Ecological Transition, Territorial Cohesion, Ministry of Energy Transition of France. Thank you all. I have, I believe, nothing else but to thank you and to wish you a wonderful rest of the day.